All right, go ahead, gentlemen. You can take a seat.
We're wondering if there's symbolism that Representative Emmer has the blue and I have the red. We're trying a little role reversal here today.
The symbolism is Tom Horner's eyes.
I've been at a number of...
I do that trick on command.
I've been at a number of the debates you all have done, and so I tried to mix it up a little and put Tom Emmer in the center there. So we'll see if that changes up the discussion at all.
Well, at least you have me on his left. So that...
Also, I'll point out to you, I'm kind of stationed behind you in order for this sight line so they can see you. Don't feel like you need to look at me. That's for them, so I can ask the questions to your backs. All right, how are we doing? 2 minutes?
I think we got 2 minutes, Tom?
2?
2 minutes.
Okay. I might mention to you all as well that we're working on scheduling a similar debate with Senator Terrell Clark and Congresswoman Michelle Bachmann. Looking towards the end of the month for that. I'm going to try that up with Rotary as well. So watch for those details if you're interested in that debate as well. You know, as long as I got a minute, I'm going to recognize our Chamber Board Chair, Bernadette Perriman. Stand up, Bernie. Bernie's chairing the chamber this year. I have a number of our board members are here and want to welcome them, as well as all the members that have come just to hear what's going on. All right. Song and dance. I'm going to dance a little bit. Okay. All right, they'll work us in. I want to welcome everyone today and tell you what a tremendous honor it is to do this. As I was scheduling and trying to arrange with all three of these campaigns, it is a real scheduling issue. And we worked hard to make it work this year. I get to do this once every 4 years with our gubernatorial candidates, and it's truly my favorite. So I want to thank you all for making the effort to be in central Minnesota. Well, good afternoon. My name is Teresa Bohnen, and I am president of the St. Cloud Area Chamber of Commerce. On behalf of the Chamber, its members and volunteers, and the St. Cloud Rotary Club, I'd like to welcome all of you to this governor's candidate debate in central Minnesota. Thank you to AM 1450 KNSI and Dan Oxner for partnering with us to broadcast all of our candidate forums this year, and also to AM 1240 WJON Radio and the Minnesota Public Radio News for broadcasting this governor's debate. It's great to get this out to a broader central Minnesota debate market. Today we welcome, and in reverse alphabetical order, it keeps the same person in the middle, but I notice most of your debates are alphabetical, so we'll go reverse today. We have on this end business leader and Independence Party candidate Tom Horner. In the middle today, we have State Representative and Republican Party candidate Tom Emmer. Welcome, Tom. And Senator and DFL Party candidate Mark Dayton. Welcome, Mark. Never have I known a time when we have as much on the line in Minnesota as this election. The format for this debate will be as follows. I'm going to ask our candidates questions regarding issues of greatest concern to our Central Minnesota Chamber members and business community. We've gotten these through our Government Affairs Committee, through Chamber members, and have tried our best to get to the core of some of the issues that they're experiencing. I've also gathered much from your plans on your websites, and I would encourage everyone to take a look at each of these candidates' websites. There's tons of information and things you may not know about them. Candidates will be allowed 2 minutes to address each question unless otherwise stated. And you will be allowed 1 minute each of rebuttal time, particularly if your names or positions are talked about in responses. And that's at the moderator's choice, so I'll let you know if you get to rebut or not. I encourage each of you to be clear and concise in your answers so we can cover as much ground as possible in this hour, and a beeper will sound at the end of your time, at which time I'd ask you to complete your sentence and stop. Our timekeeper is in front here, Chamber Vice President Gail Ivers, and she'll be signaling you when you have 30 seconds remaining of your time. All right. We're going to start with a 1-minute question, and I think I'll start with you, Mr. Horner. Here you are in beautiful downtown St. Cloud, Minnesota, and we want to extend each of you a warm welcome. We'd like to know, what's the first thing you think of when you think St. Cloud, Minnesota?
Well, the first thing I need to do is make sure I thank everybody for coming out today, and for the Chamber and the other sponsors for welcoming us here. Beautiful downtown St. Cloud is so beautiful that I took the opportunity on this beautiful day, got here a little bit early, and so took 5 minutes just to walk around the downtown to remind myself truly how beautiful it is. The first thing that comes to mind for me, though, about St. Cloud is the civic, the business, the cultural, the educational vibrancy that St. Cloud has. I mean, the community that comes together to make it work, the kind of assets that make for the best of Minnesota cities. And then certainly the other thing that comes to mind is St. Cloud's 5-star Chamber of Commerce. The only one in the state, I might add.
Wow.
All right, I give up.
Representative Emmer, what do you think of when you think of St. Cloud?
Well.
See, that's where you need those eye tricks, Tom.
Yeah, well, I don't use tricks. That's my problem. You know what, Teresa, in a word, every time we pull up here, my wife Jackie came up with me today, and Tom, you've correctly identified, it's the great culture that is the St. Cloud area. It's not just St. Cloud. But every time I drive into this town, I think of the Huskies. I don't know what it is. I think it's all the kids that I played against and with growing up in the area. St. Cloud is known for its people. That's what drives St. Cloud. It's not just its unique location in the state of Minnesota, but it's also the great people that are here and the competition that they thrive on. So that's what I think of.
Great, thank you.
And the 5-star champ. No. Somebody already used that, Mark. I'm sorry.
Senator Dayton.
Well, the disadvantage of going last is that 2 of my 3 have been used, the 5-star Chamber of Commerce, well-deserved, and growing up playing in the Olympic Development League with player coach Herb Brooks. I think of the year he coached the St. Cloud Huskies and helped build the arena here and the great hockey program that he launched here so successfully. And also, when I was in the U.S. Senate, the St. Cloud area transportation group would come to Washington twice a year, and you were always by far the best prepared. You really had a sense of the scope of the needs, and it underscored how seriously we are underfunding transportation projects, highways, city streets, bridges, and public transit, because you always had a list of top priority, urgent needs. I recognized those as you did, and the funds were always so limited relative to the scope. It also underscores one of the challenges that you face as a growing area is to accommodate those growing needs.
Thank you. We also are a most livable community. I have to give the mayor a plug as well. A follow-up to that, and Mr. Emmer, we'll have you go first on this. Do you consider St. Cloud and our surrounding area to be more of a distant suburb of the cities, or are we a standalone, autonomous, greater Minnesota community?
Well, living in Delano, Teresa, and by the way, Jackie, if we're really going to suck up today, we should talk about the first thing we think of every time we come here is we should move here, right? That's the first thing we think of. But we're in Delano. I would say that St. Cloud occupies, again, a unique place in the state of Minnesota. It is unto itself, but because of its close proximity and because of the roads that we have, 94, you got a lot of people that are commuting not only to the Twin Cities from St. Cloud, but you got a lot of people that are commuting to St. Cloud from the Twin Cities. So it just adds to its uniqueness. Not only is it unto itself, but it really is a greater Minnesota community that serves a lot more than just St. Cloud.
Thank you. Senator Dayton?
Clearly, St. Cloud in this area is an autonomous center of the state's economic growth. It's the vortex of the state's population and economic growth. And your initiatives have been properly ones that would expand this as a central area for the people in this region, as a magnet with the great St. Cloud State University, with the hospital system, the VA system here, and the connection with the metropolitan area is certainly one of the keys. I think the North Star line needs to be extended to St. Cloud, and that would be a project I certainly support, as I've probably supported, helped get about $85 million in funds to build the line as it exists today. And also worked with, back then, the attempt, and that should be continued, to get direct airline service to places like Chicago so that this can be a transportation hub for all of North Central and greater Minnesota.
Thank you. And Mr. Horner.
Well, as I always like to remind my friend Senator Dayton, that while he was able to get the money for North Star, it was my former firm that helped put together the political support that made North Star a reality and got it operating. You know, I think St. Cloud is one of those communities that uniquely looks both north and south, where it is a regional center. You look at the construction going on at Centricare and how that will be a magnet for all of central Minnesota. You look at the great assets that you have in your educational institutions, not just St. Cloud State University, which I will say will be made that much better once we get that science and engineering building built, but also the technical school, the two-year colleges, the K-12 system that you have here. This is a center that I think Minnesota really needs to embrace and to continue to be very proud of what is happening in St. Cloud.
Okay, thank you. Now, gentlemen, I have one question for each of you that was driven off of information on each of your websites. So I'm going to ask the question, give you 2 minutes to answer, and each one then of your opponents will get a minute to rebut, and we'll give you the last minute to have any comeback that you'd like. So we'll start with Representative Emmer. Your budget plan calls for a 2012-13 budget that holds K-12 education harmless, basically keeps it the same. That's 40% of the overall state budget. Now, if you do that, you have to reduce the rest of the areas by 30% to come up with the $5 to $7 billion that we need to balance the budget. And that'll be cuts to hospitals and nursing homes, further reductions in local government aids, things like that. So you've explained that what you are proposing are not budget cuts, but elimination of, quote, autopilot increases. How will you get out of these increases when many of them are related to union agreements and past promises? And maybe more importantly, how do you build support for that plan with a legislature that's been unable to find middle ground?
Well, first, Teresa, when you talk about the budget plan we've submitted, and it is the most detailed and balanced budget plan of anyone running for this office, and I do hope you will all look at it. What we're talking about is government needs to live within its means. The next governor, the next legislature, based on current revenue tax collection projections in the state of Minnesota, will actually have almost 7 to 8% more in revenue to spend. We have produced a budget, a detailed budget, again, that balances within the $33 billion. And you ask me how we're going to do it with the legislature? Well, the job creation agenda that we've offered, unlike my colleagues, it already has strong bipartisan support. We offered to start right away in 2011 to pass a reduction of the corporate franchise tax from 9.8% to 8.8%, and then again in 2012 to 7.8%. This would put over $360 million into the hands of our business owners so that they could start to make capital investments again and hire people. We also proposed a 10% exclusion to pass-through income for small business owners, partnerships, LLCs, and the like, which over a 2-year period would put about $160 million into their hands to invest in their #1 resource, people. Both of these proposals, including expanding the research and development tax credit and the angel investment tax credit, have enjoyed bipartisan support in the legislature, unlike the proposals by my colleagues. But again, the most important thing that we're delivering when you talk about K-12, we're actually increasing it by $500 million from the current biennium. And we have a very bold and aggressive approach to how we can improve our K-12 education system. My colleagues believe that government needs to grow in a pace that it wants to grow. And by the way, if it's true, as some will say, to try to tell you that we already have these commitments, then the next governor and the next legislature don't even need to show up. The fact is that every legislature has a fiduciary obligation to the citizens, the taxpayers of the state of Minnesota, to make their own budget, and that's what the next governor and legislature will do.
Senator Dayton, would you like to comment on that?
Please. Representative Emmer, your $13.8 million for the next biennium for K-12 education is really the same amount of funds as for the current biennium. That $500 million you're referring to is the difference in what the federal stimulus money provided, so that added to the $13.3 billion for this biennium. But you also have to look at the fact that we have almost 10,000 more students expected to be in our K-12 grades in the next 2 years than we did in the previous 2 years. So the current formula, funding formula for students, is what drives the budget projection for the next biennium, which is $500 million more than what your budget would provide. You also don't repay any of the shift in the next biennium, which is also called for under current law. So if you take those two combined, your budget proposal for K-12 education is effectively about 11% cut. That's going to mean more overcrowded classrooms, more schools having to go to 4-day school weeks, and higher property taxes for middle-income taxpayers. Middle-income taxpayers will pay the burden under your proposal.
Thank you. Mr. Horner, your comments on this.
Well, I think this is another example of where we have two arguments, one saying that we ought to do less with more and the other saying that we ought to do less with less. And I think we ought to do more by doing it differently. When you look at K-12 education, it's not a matter of asking how much, it's a matter of asking what for. Where do we spend the money to get the best return on the investment? And so we do need to make some investments. We need to start spending on early childhood education in a way that is responsible, in a way that drives results. When you look at our high school graduation rates among some of our fastest growing populations in Minnesota, and you see that those rates now are 60% and falling, to simply say that we're going to take this budget and we'll just deal with the next 2 years, the next 4 years, we need to be thinking 12 years out. We need to be thinking 16 years out. We need to be thinking about lifelong learning, and that starts with a commitment to early childhood learning. We need to start the transition not to K-12, but to E-12, and be ready to drive that kind of reform.
Thank you. Anything you want to rebut to?
Well, first, state's commitment to education right now is $13.3 billion, the state's commitment. We're talking about $13.8 billion, so it is going up, Senator. We're talking about more money in the classroom. We are not talking about doing less with less. We are talking about doing more with what we have, and we're talking about being responsible. State government, gentlemen, has grown in the last decade. From 2001 to 2011, it will have grown $6.5 billion. The two of you believe it should grow in the next 2 years by almost $8 billion. This is not sustainable. Somebody has to start being responsible and talking about what we need to do with what we have. You need to budget with what you have, purchase the services that you expect from government within what you have, because we can't just keep destroying the private sector by constantly taxing more. I think Minnesota wants honesty. They don't want political double talk, and what we're talking about is living within our means. Let's make sure that we can start to create jobs again in this state, because that's what drives tax collections, which pays for what we expect out of government. We got to get some balance back, and it's going to take some tough decisions, but we're willing to make them.
Thank you. Now we're going to move to Mr. Horner's plan. I have a huge interest in long-term care. We have St. Benedict's Center and Good Shepherd Lutheran Homes here, along with other long-term care facilities, very concerned with what they're facing and what the future holds. They're currently underfunded. We're all getting older by the minute. And in your budget plan, you say you will invest in Minnesota's future by, quote, creating new funding for older adult services. I'm a little leery as a chamber exec about what new funding might be. So what are you talking about in that statement?
Well, and fair enough. And whenever a politician says new funding, you ought to be wary. So let me explain what it is. And let me start with the $6.5 billion that has increased in state government spending, largely during the years in which a Republican was in control, and many of those years in which Representative Emmer was in the House of Representatives. And what we've done is continue continue to deal with the immediate instead of saying, let's look long term. Let's do what business does. Let's take the experience that I have as somebody who started a business, who has run a business, and understands that you need to make investments in the future. So look at the reality. Yes, we can say that we're going to hold the Health and Human Services budget at a current level and everything will be fine. The reality is not only are we getting to be an older state, but we also are asking our providers to take less money and to try to do a lot more with a lot less. And so the reality is that nursing homes around the state, about 28% of them already are on the verge of bankruptcy. To ask them now to take another, even a freeze, and what's likely under the coming budgets, if we don't make some smart decisions, is a reduction. Minnesota has the opportunity to create a new way to deliver and fund older adult services because we've got a great system in place that we can build on. And it's going to take a three-legged stool. We do need to have public investments. We need to make sure that we are reimbursing our providers at a rate that allows them to deliver the high-quality services. Secondly, we do need to have a community network of services so people can age in place for as long as possible. We can keep people in their own homes. But thirdly, we need to be willing to say that part of older adult services is an individual responsibility, and we ought to incent people to save and to provide for that care, and have it flexible enough so that when all of those, mostly daughters and daughters-in-law, also are caring for their parents and their in-laws, they can use some of that money to help meet their needs as well. That's the kind of balanced approach to invest now, to save a lot of money in the long run, and improve the quality of services.
Thank you. Senator Dayton, would you like to comment on that?
Yes, please. Well, the most ready source of additional funds would be the early opt-in for Medicaid, where the state, and this was put in the last budget for the next biennium, would invest $188 million net and would receive $1.4 billion in federal Medicaid funds. Now, 3/4 of that Medicaid money is spent on senior citizens and those with disabilities. So that money goes directly to healthcare providers and to hospitals, such as the one here in St. Cloud, that would receive an additional $12 million through that early opt-in. That's money that we have to provide to take care of those seniors and others who need those health services, and as importantly, to provide the financial security, the stability to hospitals such as the one here in St. Cloud and across greater Minnesota who don't have the resources to literally survive financially if they're continually underpaid for those services, and if we're not funding those who presently have no health care, who come to emergency rooms all over the state.
Thank you. And Representative Emmer.
Absolutely. The Health and Human Services is the second largest expenditure within the state's general fund budget, as most people know. It is scheduled to go up by 32% if we do what government wants us to do, by 32% in the next 2 years. If it is not controlled now, by 2020, Health and Human Services on its own will eat up the entire state budget. That's right. By 2020, if we don't do something, we will have no money for K-12, roads and bridges, for anything, public safety. We have talked about a budget item that raises Health and Human Services spending by $650 million, and we've made it clear that you got to fund your priorities: children, vulnerable adults, seniors, our nursing homes within that amount of money. You simply cannot do the same old thing, which is every time you want, just keep raising taxes. We got to create new jobs in this state in order to drive government.
Thank you. And Mr. Horner, you get 1 more minute on this topic.
Well, and just two quick comments. One is that I do agree that Minnesota ought to take the early opt-in to Medicaid, but not to keep doing the same thing. We need to take the early opt-in so that we have more people under coverage, so that then we can drive true reform. We can get to the underlying structural costs. If it is the early opt-in just to do the same thing, then we're going to keep having the same kind of problem. So we have to use that as a leverage to change. And secondly, I would like to believe that we could just cut back, we could just reduce expenditures, we could just say, all right, we're not going to provide any more money through Health and Human Services. The legislature tried that this past year with the general assistance medical care, with the program for the lowest income, the most vulnerable adults. It's not working. It's going to cost us more money. And it's not going to just cost the healthcare system money. It's coming back to employers in the form of higher insurance premiums, to property tax owners, to all of us who pay insurance premiums and out-of-pocket costs.
Thank you. And we're going to wrap up this round with a final question to Senator Dayton. This is a tough one. Are you ready?
Well, I don't know now you just mentioned it.
All right. On your website, you state, if the richest 10% of Minnesota households paid the same percentage of their incomes as the rest of the taxpayers, they would provide $3.8 billion with a B in additional revenues. And you also say that you will, this is a quote, eliminate tax loopholes such as the one allowing snowbirds to live outside of Minnesota for 6 months and 1 day of the year and pay no personal income taxes in this state. I would ensure that anyone who spends a significant amount of time in Minnesota pays taxes in Minnesota. So first of all, my first question is, what do you consider a significant amount of time? And secondly, aren't you afraid that the richest Minnesotans are just going to leave the state?
Well, let me answer the basic question about tax fairness, and that is that as I looked at the numbers, and one of the realities is that just came out last week, that from 2001 to the end of 2008, the median income in Minnesota dropped by over $10,000. The Great Recession, the economic meltdown that President Obama has inherited is definitely changed the numbers from when that forecast was made. So my proposal, which we took to the Department of Revenue, would raise taxes on the amount of money above $173,000 for a couple filing jointly, above about $152,000 for an individual. And we found that that would actually affect less than 4% of Minnesota taxpayers, and that would raise about $1.9 billion. The snowbird issue comes up because I know some people, in fact, some of them have the same last name as mine, who spend 6 months and a day or thereabouts in places that have no taxes, and then come back and live 5 months and 29 days in Minnesota and share the services, the highway system and other public services that we provide, police and fire safety and protection. And I just think, again, basic fairness is that people ought to share in the responsibility for financing the essential needs of our society. And that is unfair to those, especially middle-income taxpayers, whose tax burdens have gone up in the last decade with higher property taxes and with, if Mr. Horner had his way, paying sales tax on clothing and on consumer services. And I want to go the opposite direction. I want to protect the middle-class taxpayers of Minnesota, and so I want to make taxes more progressive, and I want to ask everyone to pay their fair share. And as we just referenced, with a $5.8 billion projected deficit, we need to generate revenues fairly and equitably, or as my opponents would do, it's going to be unfair and unequitable with higher property taxes and a higher sales tax. I want to make taxes progressive and protect middle-income taxpayers.
Thank you. Mr. Horner, would you like to comment on this issue?
Well, yes, I would. Look at every independent observer who has examined the three proposals, and almost to a person they have said, mine is the best. Mine is the best when measured against the economic opportunities for Minnesota to create jobs and fairness and equity. That includes people like Art Rolnick, one of the most respected economists in the Federal Reserve System. It includes newspaper editorials around the state that have said, mine's the budget plan that will help us grow our communities, protect our jobs. So I do start with tax reform. I do believe that we need to make sure that our businesses are competitive. We have to hold our businesses accountable, but then invest in tax reform that allows businesses to grow, to invest in research and development, new technology, new equipment. But then we have to be honest and pay for that tax reform. And so I would lower the rate on the sales tax by a full % and expand it to cover some clothing. But I also have money in there for low and middle income people.
And eliminate the corporate income tax, right? Or lower it.
And eliminate the corporate income tax,
okay,
yes.
Thank you. Representative Emmer.
Yeah, but not until 2014. Businesses need that help right now, Mr. Horner. And it would be nice if you would do, at least Senator Dayton was kind enough to submit his plan to the Department of Revenue, and they ran the numbers and found out that they didn't add up. It would be nice if you would do yours, because you want to raise $2.15 billion in new taxes, and you aren't telling people exactly what you're going to tax. You're trying to be everything to everybody, and you got to be more clear about what it is. So I hope you'll do that soon. I would say, Senator Dayton, with all due respect, your solution is the wrong idea at the wrong time. This is the wrong time to be raising taxes on anybody in the state of Minnesota. It is the right time to talk about giving people in the state more of their own resources and enabling them, empowering the entrepreneurs and the good people of this state to start creating new opportunities, new jobs. The idea that you've got, not only do the numbers not add up, but it will simply drive more business out of this state.
And you get the final minute, Senator Dayton.
Well, Mr. Horner, you can ask independent observers, as you call them. I would say ask middle-income taxpayers in Minnesota whose plan they prefer. Would they prefer to pay higher sales taxes on clothing and on services like auto repairs and haircuts? And Representative Emmer is right. Your numbers don't add up. You're about $2 billion short in revenues. You'll have to tax every service, consumer service, and you'll still come up short. That means banking, that means accounting, that means legal services. You're going to turn all those small businesses in greater Minnesota into tax collectors, and that's going to have a major impact on the economic growth that we all want to see. So ask middle-income taxpayers whether they would rather pay higher property taxes, as they would, as the League of Greater Minnesota Cities said, they would under Representative Emmer's proposal, or more sales taxes, as they would under Mr. Horner's proposal, or whether they'd rather see the richest people in Minnesota simply pay more of their fair share in taxes, and just the same percent of their income in state and local taxes as they did under Republican Governor Arnie Carlson. I think the choice is clear.
Thank you, gentlemen. Okay, we're going to move to a more general question now, and each of you will get 2 minutes to answer this, and again, rebuttal time if needed. This is about the State Employee Pension Fund. It's underfunded, is projected to get worse. In the next 10 years, it could get to the point of bankrupting our state. Yet there seems to be resistance to changing the system from a defined benefit plan to a defined contribution plan. Would you tackle this monstrous problem in your first term as governor? And do you have any suggestions on what the best approach to use would be? Representative Emmer?
The answer is yes. While all other businesses, not all, I mean in the private sector, there are a few left that have a defined benefit plan. We should have defined contribution plans, and respectfully, I would submit that not every public employee should have a pension. Not every public job, every job in government should be viewed as a career. Somewhere that changed. I would go back to Senator Dayton when you talk about property taxes are going to go up. This is a fallacy that somehow state spending is directly related to property taxes going up. Every unit of government, that's state, county, and local, must live within its means, must learn how. You talk about LGA getting changed and people who rely on that worrying about it. You know what? Only half the cities in this state get any LGA, and of the half, only a handful get the lion's share. Perhaps instead of talking about this relationship, we've raised state spending by $6.5 billion over the last decade, and you want to raise it by $8 billion in just 2 years. Instead of trying to create this fallacy that there's a relationship, let's look at cities like Minneapolis and suggest maybe you don't want to invest $1.7 million in artwork in your public buildings before you pay for your police and fire. Maybe you don't want to invest $5.7 million to study extending Nicollet Avenue to Lake Street that you closed off in the 70s before you start cutting police and fire. It's about priorities. And every level of government has got to learn how to live within its means and has to start setting the priorities that they want to fund. That's the problem, is we've had, it's not related, and when you try to say that one begets the other, it's patently false.
Thank you. Mr. Horner.
Well, let me just start by going back to my two colleagues to the left here. Apparently you didn't get the announcement, somehow missed the news. Not only did the Department of Revenue say that my numbers add up, but it wasn't a surprise because I started with Department of Revenue data. So they have said that my numbers add up. And Senator Dayton, and I think you actually know this, they add up without taxing business-to-business services. And you know that I've specifically excluded business-to-business services because I saw what you proposed last time you ran for governor when you were the one proposing sales tax on business-to-business services. And I think that is anti-competitive. So my proposal doesn't account for that. Now, I want to address the question unlike Representative Emmer, because I think pensions are a critical question, and I am the only one that is talking about specific solutions, and I think that is an important issue, and it's an issue that the governor has to address from day one. And there are only three things that we are going to do. One is that you can ask current workers to reduce some of their benefits, or retirees to reduce some of their benefits. Secondly, you can ask current workers to pay in more. And thirdly, you can ask all of us to contribute something. And the reality is, it's going to take all three of those to create an answer that works, that is politically viable, that we can get done. And it's also going to take a transition for new public employees and younger public employees to transition from a defined benefits plan to a defined contribution plan. But you just can't do that for everybody, because you will have retirees who deserve the security of the retirement that we promised them. Older workers who can't make other adjustments. And so the honest answer is, we're all going to have to contribute to the solution. And that's the reality for so much of what we're talking about. Of course, Senator Dayton, you ask people, you're not asking to pay for anything. If they like your plan, give them a free ride. Representative Emmer, punish the poor, and of course the rest of the Minnesotans get a free ride. I think Minnesotans want a shared solution on all of these issues.
Thank you. Senator Dayton.
The question was about defined contribution versus defined benefit plans. You know, the private sector employees in this country have a defined benefit plan. It's called Social Security. And it does not provide money to make anybody rich in their retirement years, but it provides a secure amount of money that people can depend upon and not suffer the vagaries of the stock market, as would have been inflicted upon them if President Bush and Republicans in the Congress had been successful in privatizing Social Security back in 2005. And it means they don't have the experience of the woman up in Two Harbors who lost her husband and then told me a couple of weeks later that her pension had been cut by U.S. Steel, where he'd worked for 31 years, to $50 a month. And with tears streaming down her face, she asks me, how do they expect someone to live on $50 a month? The average local government employee under PERA, and I served on that board when I was state auditor, has an annual pension of about $15,000 a year. Average state employee, where people have worked all their lives in state government, have an average pension of about $19,000 a year. Those are defined benefit. They can depend on that income. They bargained for those and they were willing to trade off, in some cases, salary or other benefits for that plan. Now, when I was served as on the PERA board as state auditor and also then on the State Board of Investment, all of our public pension funds were sound on an actuarial basis. In fact, the Police and Fire Fund was funded between 105 and 110%. And with the Great Recession, as it's been called, the downturn in the market, those principles lost value. And in the last legislative session, there was an agreement, and these are tough agreements to make, especially in election year. The governor and the pension leaders and the legislature deserve shared credit for that. They came up with about $2.1 billion in savings over the next 5 years, and hopefully the market will recover, and hopefully this will produce the kind of actuarial soundness that those pension funds have to have. If it doesn't, will they have to be tackled again? Yes. Will it be painful and difficult? Yes. If I'm governor, will we do it? Yes.
Thank you. I'm going to take another round with this because I think you bring up some fine points and some criticisms in each one's plans and opinions on this. How many of you in this room are on the state employee pension fund? How many of you contribute to that? Okay, not that many in this room, but we have a high proportion of state employees here in St. Cloud because of the makeup of our industry. So in view of what everyone said, would you like another minute on this? Representative Emmer, you want to go first?
Well, sure. I think the one thing that I would add when you talk about this is that at least with state employees, and I have to admit I'm going to be a little out of my element with your employees, your state employees here in the St. Cloud area, but I'm going to guess it's roughly the same. We've got an aging population of public employees in state government. You know, all in their early 50s. I shouldn't say all, but a great number. So you're looking at, in the next few years, a lot of retirements. And because of that, now is the opportunity to actually attack the problem, address the problem, so as you move forward, new employees would be moving into a defined contribution plan instead of a defined benefit. And then I would just add this. To suggest that somebody, because they want government to live within their means, is trying to hurt the poor. You know, here's the thing, folks. People who believe that government programs, more government, is going to help the poor, That's where we've lost, is the career politicians, the career government people think that's the only answer. The only answer is creating new jobs so everybody can have an opportunity for a better life.
Mr. Horner?
Well, again, I mean, I think this is an area where we just have to be honest with people. And it's not as simple as just, we'll see if a crisis happens and then we'll deal with it, or we'll just move everybody to a defined contribution plan. Those aren't answers. Come on. I mean, Senator Dayton mentioned the PERA fund, PERA. You know, the best guess, the best estimate, best case estimate is that in 10 years, we will have 60 cents on the dollar funded. Somebody's going to have to pay 40 cents. And the longer we wait, the more expensive it's going to be. And this is where I think Representative Emmer's budget falls apart, is that some of these programs do take an investment right now to save a lot of money long term. And so, yes, we do need to move younger workers and new workers into a defined contribution plan. Absolutely. We do need to ask current employees to step up and pay a little bit more through a higher contribution or through a reduced benefit. Absolutely. But we also need to be willing to say to the public, we're going to have to provide a transition so we don't pull the rug out from under those older workers and retired workers.
Thank you. And Senator Dayton, last word on this.
Mr. Horner, you obviously don't understand what it means to fund a pension fund on an actuarial basis. As I do, as having served on the PERA board, the fact is that if it's above 80%, funded an open pension fund plan, funded on an actuarial basis, is considered to be a sound financial plan. If it's funded between 70 and 80% as they are now, they're in a gray zone, and that's why it's only prudent before you make further cuts that are going to be difficult and involve real benefit losses to real people who are retired, who are depending on those benefits. You wait to see whether the market improves. If it does, the actuarial funding basis funding will improve, and if it's below 70%, then they're in the danger zone. So you have to know what the facts are, and just not throw out words like reform like slogans. I mean, these are real programs and commitments that have been made that people bargain for, that people are depending upon for their limited retirement incomes. And I would not go in there and frivolously cut those retirement benefits until I saw that it was going to be necessary. If it's necessary, absolutely yes. But we're not going to use slogans if I'm governor. We're going to use strategies that are going to produce improvement in people's lives.
Okay, so gentlemen, are you going to tackle this problem in your first term as governor? Mr. Horner, yes or no?
Yes, from day one, because if we don't, the cost is just going to escalate.
Okay. Representative Emmer?
Yes.
And Senator Dayton?
Yes, if necessary.
Okay, thank you. I wrote that down, so whoever is successful, I'll be back to see you on this one. All right, we're going to move to another topic, and this I am going to address first to Senator Dayton. Because it is addressed in your budget plan, and the other two plans I did not see this specifically called out. So Senator Dayton, in your budget plan, you propose to save $3 million by eliminating the Minnesota Trade Office. Our chamber recently hosted an event with Senator Klobuchar to draw attention to the resources that our Minnesota Trade Office provides to businesses who wish to enter global markets. We had 30 of our 1,000 business members attend that seminar with less than a week's notice. We are also very excited by the prospect of housing a satellite Minnesota Trade Office in our new St. Cloud State University Welcome Center. It's clear that Central Minnesota is looking for assistance to expand into the global economy. So what's your opinion of and your commitment to the state's responsibility to provide assistance to businesses that wish to expand to global markets? Go ahead, 2 minutes, yes.
Well, I have a strong commitment to trade, and I also know from the experience of heading that agency, Department of Economic Development and Department of Energy and Economic Development, that the bureaucracy there is not the most efficient way to provide the best trade assistance to Minnesota businesses. The governor's office is. And, you know, I've learned as I went to China 6 times this last decade, and we have a saying in China that the first-time stranger, second-time acquaintance, third-time friend. That you need to develop those relationships on an ongoing basis, and that they're looking to meet with the head of the state government, along with businesses. And that's why I didn't question Governor Plenty's going, although it's late in his term, to China and Japan, because that is a role of a governor, to open doors for businesses that could not be opened otherwise. It's not done by a bureaucracy, and I can't say there's not some value imparted by that, but anytime you cut some function in the state bureaucracy, which we're all doing, and I just put out a revised budget this morning that called for $1.2 billion in spending cuts, I mean, there are real effects there. I'm not going to pretend otherwise. What we're looking for, how can we most efficiently and effectively provide government services, and in this instance, I'm very certain from based on my own experience, that this would be far more cost effectively provided by the governor and in the governor's office. So when foreign entities are talking to the state of Minnesota, they know they're talking to the leader of the state. And I will work with businesses in St. Cloud and everywhere else in Minnesota and go as I did when I was a senator, as I did when I was commissioner with Governor Purpich, anywhere in the state or this nation or this world where there are jobs to be gained for Minnesota, where there are trade doors to be opened to assist Minnesota businesses in their export activities. And I might also just close by saying when I met with the man who said that, it was the deputy mayor of Shanghai. I was asking him, have you ever heard of Minnesota? And he tapped his chest and he smiled and he said, Medtronic. He had a heart pacer from Medtronic. That's the kind of relations we want to extend with other countries.
Thank you. And Representative Immer.
Well, I've been campaigning for 15 months, not just on creating a better business environment in the state of Minnesota, one that allows existing business to not only survive, but to thrive again, and a business environment that will attract new investment to grow jobs in the state. But I've been talking about from day one, redesigning government in the state of Minnesota from the bottom up. I don't think any area of government should be off the table, including the Minnesota Trade Office. But that being said, I will tell you, I'm not getting feedback, Senator Dayton, respectfully, that the Minnesota Trade Office should be eliminated. Perhaps there are efficiencies, perhaps in the bureaucracy that you've identified as a problem. There are some reforms that can be applied. But you talk to business in this state, you talk to the Medtronics, more importantly, talk to the agribusiness in this state. They believe we produce more food than we can eat. And you know what? We need to have markets for what we produce, and those markets are beyond Minnesota borders. There is a place for the Minnesota Trade Office. Perhaps there are reforms and efficiencies that can be found, but I don't believe at this point that elimination is the answer.
And Mr. Horner.
Minnesota absolutely needs to keep looking beyond its borders. But it's not just a matter of the trade office. It's a matter of a comprehensive approach to how we keep and extend Minnesota's competitiveness. And I think there are 4 critical elements. First of all, we need to be a state that is always investing in innovation, in new ideas. And that's basic and applied research at our 2- and 4-year schools. We need to have that biomedical diversity center on the campus of the University of Minnesota. And next door to it is the private sector campus of private companies that are going to commercialize those projects, of private venture capitalists that are going to fund it. We ought to be investing in the science and engineering building on St. Cloud State's campus so that we can develop the second important piece of a competitive global state, the talent pool. Minnesota's distinctive advantage always will be our talent, and we need to enhance that. We need to develop it. We need to make sure it is affordable to everybody. Thirdly, we need a competitive tax system, and that's where Senator Dayton's plan falls short. We cannot have the highest income tax rate in the country and be competitive. We do need to be a state that is cognizant of our role, not just in the country, but in the world, and we have to have a competitive tax rate. And lastly, we do need to make sure that we're able to facilitate the development of relationships, the development of connections, going outside of our borders, state and national borders, but also looking at how we facilitate relationships within our borders. There's a terrific company, Recon Robotics, came out of engineering research at the University of Minnesota, based in the Twin Cities, manufactured in Winona, selling around the world, and now developing a new industry that will be based in Minnesota in microrobotics that will go global. That's the kind of investments we need to be making.
Thank you. Do you want to rebut on this?
I'd just say, Mr. Horner, my proposal, as I've said before, and it's spelled out in my release this morning, would keep the top state income tax rate below the top in the country, which is 11%. Mine would be 10.95%. No, well,
my apologies.
which is my commitment to making taxes fair in Minnesota. Now you disdain it. And you say that you're not going to raise taxes on people making $1 million or $5 or $10 million. You're not going to raise their income taxes by even $1. And that's a fundamental difference between us. You want to extend the sales tax to clothing that middle-income taxpayers have to buy to send their kids to school. You want to extend the sales tax to consumer services, consumers' purchases of haircuts and auto repairs and banking services and brokerage services paid by the consumers, paid by middle-income taxpayers. You want to raise taxes on the middle class. I want to raise taxes on the wealthy. Fundamental difference between us in this campaign.
Would you like a minute, Mr. Horner?
Well, maybe I would. Senator, we've had this discussion before, and I understand that you don't like sales tax anymore. You used to like it, now you don't like it. I get it. But you also know that I've put into my proposal $350 million specifically to mitigate the impact of the sales tax on low and middle income people. We can do that by having some tax holidays. Maybe we exempt children's clothing. Maybe we don't start the sales tax on items less than $100. We'll figure that out. But the reality is you still don't acknowledge the difference between taxing income and taxing wealth. You don't get your money from people earning $100 million a year, and you know that. Otherwise, you wouldn't have your income level down to $130,000 and $150,000 in taxable income. It's Willie Sutton. You go where the money is. That's where the money is, and that's income. And those people are not necessarily wealthy, Senator. They can't spend down to the last penny the way you can because you have assets behind it. We need to make sure that we're taxing fairly in a way that allows businesses to grow and people to thrive.
I'm going to give you just another minute, Senator Dayton, on that because I feel like that called you out. But I also want to get Representative Emmer in on this discussion. Do you have any comment you'd like to make on what you're hearing?
I will not raise taxes. I mean, here's what you got. Think about this. It doesn't matter which taxes. It's still the wrong answer at the wrong time. This is not the time to be talking about raising any taxes in the state of Minnesota or the United States of America. When the average family is out there struggling just to put food on the table, put clothes on their kids, and to pay the mortgage, we've got politics as usual. The politicians, people in government, once again, say the only answer is just raise taxes, whether it's on the wealthy, which I will submit, Senator Dayton, we're better than that in this country. It should not be about class warfare. We should be about everybody's success. And trying to split hairs and call it fairness when you're really picking on different classes, we're better than that. And I will say, when you talk about raising sales tax, great, let's have a policy discussion. But right now, raising taxes on anybody is the wrong answer. It's time to talk about lowering taxes, making government efficient, and putting our entrepreneurs and our families in charge of their own destiny again. Give them the tools to create new opportunities and new jobs in this state.
Go ahead. 1 minute, Senator Dayton.
Representative Emmer, you're going to do what Governor Plenty did, which is to force local governments and school districts to raise their property tax levy, as you did when you were on the Delano City Council, and you said when you voted for a 16% property tax levy increase, it was because of the make up for the cut in local government aids. So, you know, that's why property taxes have gone from $4 billion when Governor Plenty took office to $7 billion today. That falls on businesses. It falls on individuals, especially middle-income taxpayers, especially seniors on limited and fixed income struggling to stay in their homes. So, you know, the Department of Revenue, who we said is going to be the ultimate authority in these, says that for every dollar cut in local government aids, property taxes go up by 67 cents. So let's take them as the authority, since they're the ones we've decided that will be the arbiter, and say that for every dollar you're cutting in school funding and local government aids, cities, counties, and townships, property taxes are going to go up by 67 cents. That's just the reality of the way Minnesota's fiscal interdependency among governments works.
Go ahead.
Thank you very much. First, Senator Dayton, where we differ is this. I have served on a city council, you're right. And I think local decisions are best made by people at the local level. It's the most transparent, it's the most accountable. When we make the decision, our neighbors, those people that we see at church and we see at school and we see at the local coffee shop, if they don't like it, they'll vote us out. I found one thing in my short time in St. Paul, and perhaps you experienced it in Washington. It's really easy for somebody in St. Paul to spend our money, all right? I think it's better. That's where those decisions should be made. And this other bit, you've been serving up a lot of political baloney, and it's pretty thick today when you talk about how somehow property tax increases are directly correlated to cuts in LGA or cuts in other things, decisions made at the state level. Every decision of local government, state government, and county government has to be evaluated by those elected officials. That is entirely the responsibility of local officials. And if I made that decision, I did it responsibly, and I answered to the local people in my city, and others should do the same thing.
And Mr. Horner.
Well, I would just say that the Coalition of Greater Minnesota Cities took a survey of their member communities and found that 40% of their communities had cut basic services, fire and police, and that was before the 2010 legislation. That was before the additional cuts. I find it offensive, frankly, to suggest that mayors, that city council members around the state are saying, we're going to protect our income and so we'll cut fire and police. That's not the way the decision happens. Minnesota is better than that. And when you do cut programs at the state level, not just LGA, but healthcare programs that undermine our local hospitals, healthcare programs that undermine nursing homes, and all of those kinds of programs, mayors, city council members are backed into a corner where if they want a livable community, they want a community that can compete for families, for businesses, for the things that we value in Minnesota, then their hands are tied.
I think that calling your stuff baloney gives you an extra minute there, Senator Dayton.
And I called it political baloney.
I just point out again, it's the analysis of the Minnesota Department of Revenue, which we have all said will be the arbiter of what's political baloney and what's fact. And that's the Department of Revenue's analysis as fact.
Thank you. Okay, I know we could debate this all day.
Well, one more, if you don't mind.
Okay, go ahead.
And the only thing I want to do is this, because I have a lot of respect for these two gentlemen. We do have a different way of looking at it. And when my friend to my right, I guess today, wow, my friend to my right says 40% of them cut police and fire. Why? Why? I mean, look at Ramsey County. The county commissioners this year in June gave themselves a 2% raise. There's a disconnect, folks, between people who think that serving in public office is a career, working in government is a career, versus those that are out struggling to make ends meet. There's a disconnect, and we've got to start realizing that in order for government to even exist, you got to have a growing private economy. And right now, talking about raising taxes and further eroding our private economic advantage. You talk about jobs that are here. Well, they're not going to be here, this great workforce, if we don't have the opportunity for them. Time to start thinking of those families and letting them keep more of their money and get government to fund police and fire instead of funding art in public places and funding fountains and other things. You got to have priorities.
By the way, that big fountain at Lake George you see, that's not public funding. The Rotary Club paid for that. Okay, I got a quick round, okay? These are like yes or no, and we're going to go right in a row. Mr. Horner, Representative Emmer, Senator Dayton. Will you help in our pursuit of the final bonding money for the expansion of the St. Cloud Civic Center, which, by the way, recently was renamed to St. Cloud Rivers Edge Convention Center? Will you help with that in the 2011 legislative session?
Yes, and I think it should be part of a responsible bonding bill that does get passed next year.
Representative Emmer.
I've never supported a bonding bill. I would like to see a bonding bill that is job specific. For instance, as I've already talked to you, Teresa, this should be funded. It has statewide, regional significance. More importantly, the people of St. Cloud have already raised a significant amount of the funds. This is a situation that should get the support. The answer is yes.
Thank you. And Senator Dayton.
Yes, very definitely, and also for the engineering laboratory at the St. Cloud State University, as well as addressing the challenges that St. Cloud State University students are facing with tuition having gone up over $500 over the last 2 years. We've got to make tuition affordable at our public colleges and universities.
How about the self-building, the science engineering building, Mr. Horner?
Yes, absolutely.
And
we'll have to see the final bill.
Okay.
That one I won't commit to.
Okay. All right. And, you know, some of you may know these, but just for clarification, Racino, are you for Racino, Mr. Horner?
Yes.
Not to balance the budget, no.
But for other spending?
If in the industry there is a opportunity that presents itself to expand jobs and economic opportunity, yes, you'd have to consider it. But the idea that we should keep offering new streams of revenue just to avoid the day of reckoning, to avoid the day of reforming government and doing what we have to do to put it on long-term financial stability, I would have to say no.
Okay. And Senator Dayton, Racino?
We're going to expand gaming. It's not going to be to line the pockets of private interests. It's going to be to generate revenues that we need to go back to 5-day school weeks and reduce class sizes.
Is that you're for a casino or not?
What I've said I would support is consider supporting is one state-owned operated casino at the Mall of America or at the airport. For that purpose, that would be the funds would go to the public purpose as the proceeds from the state lottery that would go to, in this case, education.
Okay, so expansion of gaming, you're all in the right situation, would possibly consider it. Okay. And finally, I think we know this after Sunday, Viking Stadium. Mr. Horner.
Yes. And I'm the only one who has put out a specific plan that is viable, that has real funding, and that says to taxpayers, if you don't want to pay for a Viking Stadium, I have a legitimate plan that says you won't have to pay for it. But it does create a public asset. It does keep the Vikings. We have to deal with it in 2011. It is a program that we can get done.
Okay. Representative Emmer?
I don't know if that's exactly what it was, but good for you, Tom. I would say this. Yes, there should be a Viking Stadium. I believe that the Vikings are like every other business in the state of Minnesota. They need to succeed just like any other business. The governor should be helping, and the legislature, facilitate whatever arrangement works for local authority. We had one in the city, in Hennepin County this year that was produced where a revenue stream from the existing convention center, when it's paid off, could be redirected to support the financing for a Viking Stadium. What I will not agree to is I don't believe that state general fund tax dollars should be paying for it.
And finally, Senator Dayton.
Yes, but the issue is not having a plan in September. It's a willingness to negotiate next year when the legislature's in session where this will have to be done. And this is not a Viking Stadium if we build it. It's a people's stadium, people of Minnesota. And it has to be in the public interest, like any other economic development project, as I learned when I was Commissioner of Economic Development for the state. For the 8,000 jobs it would provide for 3 years, for the tax revenues that those employed people would pay, for the revenues paid by the contractor and by the vendors, for the proceeds from operating the stadium. And I agree with Representative Emmer, it should not be paid for out of general revenue funds. It should be paid for by user fees on those who use the stadium and by others who benefit from it.
And Mr. Horner, do you have any comment on the good for you statement?
Sure. I mean, it's great to say here a lot of great principles. I'm the only one willing to take the leadership and put out a plan where we can start to engage the public. And so, absolutely, those who benefit most from it ought to pay for it. The taxpayers ought to be protected. We ought to make sure that we get the budget balance, that we take care of education, job creation, health care first. We can do all of that if we start having honest conversations with the public in September and October.
Okay, thank you. Now, this is a final question. It's our wrap-up question. I'm going to give you a minute apiece on it because there may be a rebut on this question, and I'd ask the radio stations want to stick with us. I know we're getting close to time. All right. Mr. Emmer, I'm going to start with you first. Do you feel there have been any claims or public advertisements that have misrepresented you or your policies? And I'll give you 1 minute to explain something that's really bugged you this campaign season to set the record straight. 1 minute.
No, just that question bugs me. No. Let's try to stay positive, Teresa. You know, politics is politics. I think Jackie and my wife Jackie's here. I hope you get a chance to meet her before we leave. But no, we committed long ago that we're going to run a positive campaign. We're going to stay above it. We're going to talk about our vision for the future of Minnesota. I think Minnesotans are sick and tired, frankly, of people always pointing back and trying to assess blame. Let's just agree that regardless of whether it was Democrats, Republicans, or other, good people had good ideas for the future of the state of Minnesota 30 years ago, 20 years ago, 10 years ago. It's not working. We can no longer keep following the same path. We must have government live within its means. You must reform government, redesign it to deliver services efficiently, and you must create a business environment that not only allows existing business to survive, but thrive again and start growing new jobs in the state of Minnesota. That's the positive vision for the future of this state that we'll keep delivering.
Senator Dayton.
I deplore the personal attacks against Representative Emmer. I think they're totally out of place in Minnesota politics. I agree with Representative Emmer. He has run a positive campaign in his own advertising, as I have done as well. And I also disagree, although I put it in a different category, the misrepresentation of my position on taxing internet activity. I made it very clear back when I was in the United States Senate that I would vote against any tax on the internet. It never came before the U.S. Senate, but I definitely would not support it if I'm governor. I'd veto any attempt to tax the internet.
And Mr. Horner.
Yes, I'm really bugged that we didn't get a question that allowed me to announce that the endorsing arm of the Minnesota Medical Association this morning announced its unanimous endorsement of me for my vision for health care.
Thank you.
As my head, the Minnesota Nurses Association endorsed me for mine.
Any
See, and I
endorsements
gave
for
you
you
that
there?
opening.
Mr. Ever, any endorsements you want to talk about?
Yeah,
Okay.
my wife Jackie endorsed me.
All right, gentlemen, I guarantee you your time here this morning was well spent. There are a lot of undecided voters in central Minnesota, as evidenced by some unscientific polling that we've done at chamber meetings asking that question. So I want to thank all of you for participating. Well, I welcome you for a meet and greet at the chamber anytime you're through between now and election. And also want to thank the St. Cloud Rotary, AM 1450 KNSI, AM 1240, and Minnesota Public Radio News for participating us with this governor's debate. Thank you all for being here.